Hi, I'm Tom. This is the Shiny New Object podcast, and this is a podcast about new marketing technology. I have the privilege every week of interviewing someone in the industry that I either think is interesting, I look up to, or surprising, or a combination of all those things. And what I have today is all those things. We have Mary Keane-Dawson, who is the co-founder and CEO of Truth. And her shiny new object will be blockchain, media, and data. So Mary and I have kind of rubbed shoulders a few times over the years, but her name leapt out when I was at We Are Social, and they were planning their annual Think Forward event, which is kind of prediction about the future of social. And someone said, oh, there's going to be a lady talking who set up a media agency that's all based on the blockchain. And you just can't say that to an innovation director without your head falling off with the excitement. So I went down to watch your talk, which is about your family, as I seem to remember. Yeah. And it was one of the real highlights of last year in terms of public speaking. And so I've been sort of haranguing you ever since to hang out. And now we have a cheap glass of house white wine and you're here. So it would be fantastic if you could tell the audience who may not have heard of you that kind of overview of your career so far, and finishing up on Truth and how that came about.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's very kind of you to introduce me in that way. I've been in media for 31 years this year, and that's a long time in anyone's lifetime. And I can't believe I'm still here, but at the same time, I can't believe that I could ever give it up. I've had a lot. I started in national newspapers. I very quickly transitioned to desktop publishing, which was in 1987, the internet of the time. And that really basically lit my entrepreneurial streak. And through one thing and another, I landed up working for a failing PLC when I was 33. And myself and my then business partner, we basically cobbled together a deal and bought Sparfax, the world's largest provider of in-flight entertainment and media solutions. That was a loss-making venture at the time, and we turned it round and sold it to WPP 12 months later, and then we went to work for WPP. And that was my first taste of corporate culture, and that was in 1999. And I have to say that the WPP of those days was a dynamic, interesting, incredibly revolutionary organisation that then invited me back 14 years after I left to go and run Neo at Ogilvy, which was their digital performance and media business. And I thought to myself, well, you know what? That wouldn't be a bad place to end my career. A few years at Ogilvy. I always admired the kind of ethos of it. And when I got there, I was stunned. I was stunned at the adversarial nature of the relationship between clients and the people who worked in the organisation. And I couldn't work it out because, I come from a world where clients pay the bills and you do the best possible job you can for the client. And I'd suddenly come back into an organisation where people talked about, burning the revenue rather than investing the media funds. And it seemed very, very different to the world that I had been brought up in terms of my induction into advertising and communications.
So what had happened in those 14 years, do you think?
Well, I think quite simply what had happened was that the people who, I had originally started off in, media and advertising with had basically, the really creative, intelligent and bright ones had gone off and started their own companies and then sold them to the big holding groups, took their own outs and retired to Sussex or wherever and to paint and to design and whatever. And the people who'd remained in those organisations were the Machiavellian politicians that were basically the ones who, ran the organisation so that they could, to the betterment of themselves. I mean, one of the things that I do say repeatedly is if you reward the wrong behaviour, you're going to get the wrong behaviour, right? And so, the kind of growth of these organisations was so driven by bonus culture and by, basically longevity. No one ever leaves, People stay there for, certainly I could give you examples of people who've been in these organisations for between 25 and 50 years, and they're in very senior positions. They're very hierarchical and they're very status driven, and that is just so out of kilter with the culture of the millennial, the culture of my own belief system, my values. And it's not about embracing innovation so that we can improve the lot of our clients or improve the lot of our customers, i.e. the citizens who buy this stuff, right? It's actually about improving our own personal, situation. And yeah, everyone has to pay a mortgage, and everybody has to, well, not everybody, some people now can't even get on the ladder for mortgages, And I felt incensed by the kind of superficiality and, hashtag diversity as PR that I was encountering when I was talking and working with these people. And I'm afraid that the one thing that being in the industry for 31 years has certainly taught me is I don't give a shit. Yeah? If you're doing the wrong thing, call it out. And so that's what I did.
Give me an example of that.
Well, I suppose, truth is the ultimate example of that, because I was so when I left Ogilvy, because basically Neo was very successful, and I'm not blowing my trumpet, by the way, it was the team, 100%, the guys who actually put someone in a very senior position at Ogilvy called the worker bees. They were the ones who delivered. It was just, I was one of the people who enabled that delivery, and we trebled our revenue in a 12-month period, which, was astonishingly successful, right? It was the easiest job I've ever had in my life.
So I'm going to push you on this. What were those moments where I love that as a statement, that if you see something that's been done wrong, call it out.
Call it out.
Give me an example of when that was really awkward, or when the person receiving that wasn't expecting it. What was your biggest sucker punch where you really laid someone flat?
Well, I think it was probably when we'd had a whole diversity, week.
When was this?
This was, it would have been about 18 months ago now.
Okay.
And
a diversity week.
A diversity week.
Well, there you go.
It was like, series of events, and we'd moved into the beautiful building, which is Sea Containers House, or Sea Containers as it's called now. And, it was, I was like astonished at the fact that we were, putting forward all these people that were supposedly, the new face of the company, of the organisation. And then, when I went into a board meeting, and everybody was white, middle-aged, Oxbridge educated, and the doors were closed, and it was all like, thank God we've got that out of the way. But just so everybody understands, if we don't make the number, we're not going to get our bonuses. And the conversation just was only about money. It was, it was never about investing in the talent or the people or the clients. And I just sat there and I said, when is this going to stop? When are you guys going to actually realise that there's a whole new modern world out there which does not buy into this, And of course that went down like a cold bag of sick. But
then turn after that.
I knew my days were probably numbered. And, I looked like them. I smelt like them. Maybe a bit more modern, when I say looking. I looked a bit more modern. But I kind of fitted into a certain degree. But I definitely didn't fit in. And when, I'd worked for Martin Sorrell previously, you could speak your mind and people would listen, because there were loads of entrepreneurs in the organisation, because he bought, companies that were born out of entrepreneurship. What I went back to was an organisations that were just basically driven by people who were yes men and women who, kind of said the right things to each other in their echo chamber, right? But they did not do the right thing by the client or by the citizen.
So tell me how you went from that truth bomb in that meeting. Oh my God, I set myself up for a horrible segue to the truth. Oh my God, that was awful. So you had that moment of realisation.
Yeah.
I think probably happens often in agencies at
Yeah.
at a senior level, you go, I can't do this anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
So talk me through specifically, what were the steps to get from that conversation to founding Truth?
Well, I think the things were taken out of my hands actually because Mindshare basically took over. There was a consolidation of all the media businesses within WPP, and my that was nothing to do with me. That was nothing to do with I think that was just to do with the way that the business was going, and I think the direction and travel of all of these businesses is extremely interesting and intriguing. Because it's about being fit for purpose, right? And fundamentally, the distance between consumers and their brands is, we have to get closer, not further away, right? And the whole point was that the agency model has become basically about, creating as many layers of the onion as you possibly can. And what's happening now is that those layers are being peeled back by people like you, who are now actually working in clients. They understand technology, they get what's happening. And I was talking to those people. Those are the people I relate to. I might be 54, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm still 18. I'm learning all the fucking time. Sorry, I shouldn't have sworn.
You can swear as many times as you want.
But and I'm not afraid to say I don't understand that. So the thing about blockchain and how I got to the truth was that I'd been I came out of it, and everyone started saying, "Why don't you do your own thing?" And I was like, "Oh my God, that is such a big thing to say. Do my own thing. Own thing? What? I don't know what agency means anymore."
So you were made redundant?
No, I wasn't made redundant. I was basically given the option of either staying on and being part of this new world order that I just didn't want to be part of. So
or there's some cash. Go and chill out for a bit.
Go and do whatever you
Brilliant.
want.
What
What's the result?
Amazing, yeah. And so sorry to get personal here, but
okay.
how long did you have? How much kind of runway, if you like, in startup terms did you have? Did you think, well, I've got 3 months of this, or a couple of weeks, or shit?
No. I had. Well, two things happened, Tom. The first one is I have been in media for a very long time, and I'm actually a pretty good negotiator. So I left with no restrictions. And that was a very major mistake, because don't ever underestimate me. So I was underestimated again. And maybe that's something to do with being a 54-year-old woman. I don't know. So what I've done since I've left, I think, has surprised certainly the people that are behind me. And I'm sure it's really fucking irritating them.
So what? So you were out the door, like with a no compete.
Yes.
Thing,
well, I have no restrictions.
Just right. Okay. So
I can do what the fuck I like.
Right. Okay. So it's so then people were saying to you, you should do your own thing.
Yeah.
Like,
What are you going to do?
That's big. And then did you have like a light bulb moment, or was it over beers, or
Adam Graham, who I have known for many years and in fact took over as chairman of Beamer when our friend left. He said to me, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, I'm being romanced by various big 6 media agencies because they want to do, they want to find out what's the next thing to do." And because obviously digital is so essential to any major client's e-commerce. I mean, it's at the heart of the business now. I mean, one time digital was the team that sat near the toilets at the back of the IT room, right? And now, digital is actually the business. So, when you're talking about the Google stack, you're talking about how programmatic integrates with social and how native is, essentially, the whole poem strategy that is so much at the heart of FMCG and increasingly.
And what's the poem strategy?
So paid, owned, earned media. So basically that whole kind of, conundrum. And of course clients, many big clients, very big clients, we're talking like the Nestle's, the Mandales, the Fords, the Volvos, the Mazdas, the big entertainment companies even, realise that they are quite a long way behind where the consumer actually is right now. And the consumer lives in the world of social, right? And that phone, that mobile, is at the end of their hand, and they're in it every single second of the day. I saw a really interesting stat the other day that, on average, something ridiculous, like 9 hours of our time is being spent on a phone every day.
I think my favourite annoying sales stat from Facebook is something like the average millennial scrolls through like 46 metres a day on their phone.
Yeah.
Like you just imagine a huge lightsaber of content extending out from their phones every day. But so you were speaking to the chairman of Beamer. What are you going to do? And then what happened?
He'd left Beamer, and he was basically running a group, an alternative network group that he was building called TMG, and he just said, if you want to, come and do something, come and do it here, because we want to be the agile, network for the future of for clients. So I thought, what? Great. Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
And what was it?
So it was originally an alternative media agency, because I thought, look, what do I know? What do I think? What's the problem needs to be solved? Yeah. The problem needs to be solved is transparency and honesty in the media programmatic pathway. Blockchain was something that I had known about for quite a long time. In fact, how I know about blockchain is because it's nearly 10 years ago now, 9 years ago, I suddenly got an electricity bill which was 300% higher than the previous electricity bill, and I couldn't work out why until I found out that my youngest son was mining Bitcoin.
When was this?
This was 7 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. And he is the crypto kid, right? And
so you still got all that Bitcoin?
He actually had it robbed. And that was a really interesting journey that I went on, because that was a conversation we used to have in the car when he was sitting in the back seat, and he'd start talking to me, and I didn't actually really understand.
How old's your son at this point?
Now he's 16, but at the time he was 11.
11?
Yeah.
He was. You should get him on.
Oh, you have to get him on. Let's
get him on.
He actually did He did an internship at a social media business last year.
That's a bit of a downturn, isn't it? To go from mining crypto
to social media.
Social, with all due respect.
But he's very good at buying influencers.
Right, so your son's caning your electricity bill.
Yeah.
It's in the back of the car. You don't understand.
No.
And
then we worked it out that he had two very powerful gaming hard drives.
So he'd go to sleep with these things.
And they were just whirring all the time. And that's when I realised, I said to him, why is your computer on constantly? And he said, because I'm mining Bitcoin. And I was, what is Bitcoin? What is it? And then he explained it to me. And so I listened to this very kind of convoluted explanation by an 11-year-old. And it was quite convoluted, by the way. And then I said, it sounds to me a bit like football cards. There used to be a thing called Panini football cards, and you would basically collect them. Sticker albums, exactly. Of course, yeah. And he said, yeah, that's exactly what it is. What you do is you find the rarest one, or you try and get the, and that was basically, that was it. Yeah. For me, it was like, it was basically football. It was a bit like baseball cards, where the rarest ones were the most, interesting. And that kind of always was in my head. So as blockchain, became more robust, and we were talking about how could you verify that a programmatic media campaign actually was really a programmatic media campaign, and everything was as agreed. So the 15% you were paying, your DSP, the data provider, etc.
I have to pull you up on this.
Sure.
Right. So, can you explain truth and how it works?
Sure.
To the person listening to this who has a probably a passing interest in blockchain.
Sure.
Probably been to maybe an event, so we're certainly not talking about a practitioner.
Yeah.
And I know that obviously terms like programmatic, you and I may understand them
Sure.
to varying levels. But can you talk about specifically the truth offering in terms of those two things, programmatic and blockchain, in a way that someone who's not a pro would understand?
Sure. So I think the first thing to say is advertising in your newsfeed is really fucking annoying. And 99% of the time people feel very pissed off with it because it is retargeting. So they might have gone to see, I don't know, looked at a sofa on made.com. By the way, there are other, furniture providers available. And on their desktop, and then suddenly their mobile phone, they've been bombarded with ads for sofas, from DFS or whoever it might be. And the methodology and the way that we, that is done is, and how those ads are served to you, is basically because we use the data that cookie data, and we basically design, ways in which we can target you because we know your cookie history. And it's all about trying to buy your eyeballs as cheaply as possible. Unfortunately, apart from being just really irritating for the person who's actually consuming their newsfeed, it's also very subject to fraud. So you have a lot of hackers in that space. You have a lot of false URLs.
Sorry, what is a hacker in that space?
So basically that would be false URLs being presented as real eyeballs. Okay, so publishers delivering delivering eyeballs to that advertiser.
So what's going on there? What's technically going on there? So a media agency sells X number of impressions or eyeballs, and there's a hacker
buys those impressions. It's okay.
And a hacker generates social profiles or websites or like.
Yeah. Primarily, they do it in a number of ways, and it can be incredibly sophisticated. But the most basic way is that they create a false URL, which could look like, smell like, and taste like ft.com, for example, but it might be ft.com/Ukraine. And it's not real. It's just basically a bot that's burning the revenue. So it's pretending to deliver impressions. And that is part of the challenge about when you're dealing with technology, right? Because technology isn't human beings, and technology is reading. Algorithms don't read body language; they read, bits of data.
So
right?
Another dummy question from me. So how does it transpire that a media agency would sell impressions or views against those fake websites? Are they knowingly going, well, that's probably 500,000?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think in the last 5 years in particular, there's been an acceptance by the industry that there's two taxes, right? The first one is the ad tech tax, which is basically the number of advertising technologies that you might use in a programmatic campaign to deliver and optimize, the eyeballs. So clearly within that supply chain, you have the possibility of darkness, and that darkness could include that you make an agreement with a supplier to charge you an SSP, which is basically a sales side platform, to deliver media inventory to you at say 10%, but in actual fact there's some deal going on between the publishers and the platform that is maybe nearer 25%, and the SSP is actually taking that 25%, and the publisher's getting far less, because those points of entry for those impressions and for that revenue are, often, it's very, very complex. And probably to anyone listening to this podcast, I'm probably explaining it very, very badly, but they're probably thinking, why is that so complicated? And I think that's where I got to when I went back into a media agency after being out of it for quite a long time, thinking, why are we doing it this way? It's just out of control. And it seemed, not seemed, it is, that if you look at the kind of ecosystem and the number of players that are actually in the ad and marketing technology ecosystem, there are just thousands and thousands of pieces of tech, right? And they're not there, in my opinion, to ensure that you, as a consumer, have a really great experience of that brand's advertising. They are there to make money. It's as simple as that. So you have that part of it, which is dark and extremely difficult to understand unless you're really deeply in the tech. The second part of it is that you do have criminals and fraudulent activity around pretending to be the Financial Times or a subdivision of the Financial Times. Someone said to me recently there are 2.5 million websites in their networked, in terms of how many websites they can actually buy media on, okay? And that is a very, very long tail. And trying to audit 2.5 million websites, manually or otherwise, is very difficult. But I would ask the question, why do I need 2.5 million URLs to advertise to you? I don't.
So how does blockchain come into this? How does Truth's proposition answer the fraud question?
Right. So the first thing to say is Truth is a transparent media agency that has no legacy. And what I mean by that is I have not got 50 years of trading behind me in one organisation that I need to protect. That's the first thing. We have a completely clean sheet of paper and no legacy, which basically means that we are creating our legacy and how we want to be perceived and to how we want to act in the future. And therefore, the transparency is baked into our values and what we do for our clients.
So how does that transparency work with the
So
blockchain?
we don't.
So I'm a new. Should we do a bit of role play?
Yeah.
So I'm the new client. I'm who shall I be? Bovril. I'll be Bovril.
Be Bovril. I love Bovril. Yeah.
So I'm Bovril, and I'm like, right, I'm sick of my media agency.
Yes. So basically, do you want to work with a media agency that puts transparency right at the heart of everything it does and is all about value rather than about basically doing it for 1% and just delivering you as many impressions as we possibly can?
And so you have we were chatting before we started that there's an underlying technology or
Yes.
a tool.
Yes, so underlying what we do is, first of all, we are committed to transparency and we are committed to working to improve the relationship between advertising and consumers. Because at the moment, consumers are switching advertising off, okay, wherever they can. And I think what we'll see post Friday, the date of GDPR becoming the law, is more and more people are not re-signing to newsletters. They're not giving permission for people to market to them, and that's going to have a massive impact on the advertising industry. However, getting back to what we do, it's really important that we reinstate the value of the communication between consumers and brands, because at this moment in time, as far as online digital media advertising, we have a real job on our hands, because it's not about presenting appropriate content and media. It's all about burning the revenue budget or burning the media budget. And as long as that mentality exists, we're going to have a very negative relationship with the consumer.
And so the blockchain solves that problem because at any point you could be called into account.
Yes.
Right, okay, so I'm going to take this $5,000 of my budget. Where did it go?
Yeah.
Hand over to me
absolutely.
the website where that went.
So
and you'd have to, because it's on the blockchain. Is it what element of the blockchain? It's like,
So let me-
are you on Ethereum or?
No, we don't use Ethereum and we don't use a token at all. What we use is we use a distributed ledger, which is a professional services company.
Pet hate. every time I hear distributed ledger, I've got to call bullshit on it, because people in the industry use that, I think, without fully understanding it. Obviously you do, but you would never use that expression anywhere else. I had this argument with...
But it's a ledger. I mean, it's a ledger.
What's a ledger?
What?
Like,
right,
you know,
okay.
do you know what I mean? It's like,
sure.
What is the common sense description of that?
The common sense description of the distributed ledger is quite simply that there has to be... The decision if something happened the way that you described it, okay, the way that it was baked into a contract, there has to be a consensus agreed between a bunch of unrelated decision makers, in this case nodes, right, or computers.
Yeah.
And as long as the majority of them, in our case is 80%, agree that the activity that is described in your smart contract took place as you describe it, then that gets a big tick. So it's no central authority.
So smart contract. What?
Smart contract is essentially where you set some rules like you would in an algorithm, and you bake them into a block, which essentially basically then every time you take an instant and you set an instruction or you do an activity, it is then matched through a matching engine to the smart contract, and as long as it agrees with the smart contract and that the distributed ledger is also in an agreement through the matching engine, then you have alignment, you have consensus, and that's all it is. It's just that you can't go back and change it later.
Yeah, right.
That's the big difference between a central authority and a distributed ledger. Because if the distributed ledger, which uses cryptography to basically, once the agreement and consensus is made, then it is hashed, which is where the cryptography comes in. It's basically recorded to the block, and then you can't go back and change it later unless you've got all the computing power in the world. Or, obviously, with quantum computing coming down the line, there may be some changes that are necessary there. But right now, from the perspective of the safest place of writing a contract to a ledger, distributed ledger is the best way of doing it.
So can I ask you another personal question?
Sure.
When you thought up the idea for Truth,
were
you ever secretly really worried it wasn't going to work?
Yes, completely.
Come on, tell me about that. So, tell me about that kind of like...
Oh, God, that was horrible. That was a really horrible time,
like,
actually. Because although I can read code and I can probably put together a bit of it, because I've made it my mission in life not to be completely and utterly in the hands of developers, I am not a blockchain developer, and I needed to work with somebody people who are just passionate about this stuff, and that was the other reason why I was frightened, because I didn't really know anyone except my youngest son, who was in that space.
Who's now your lead developer, and
he's now our lead developer, and our social, and he's our community manager, and I was very fortunate, and we were very fortunate in that we were approached by Ollie Southgate very early on. He heard about what we were doing, and he was formerly at Digitas LBI and at Havas, and he was just like, boom, I am your man, And he came to us, and he is absolutely brilliant and honest and true and a very, very smart guy. And he believes in what he's doing, and he's just been fantastic. So by working with him, I mean, first of all, I have learnt so much. It's been amazing. But also by joining the community, and that is actually, without getting too emotional about it, the number one thing I love about this. I described to you my experience of going back into corporate media land, and now I'm in this revolutionary, new world order. And the people that I'm amazed at how many people I know who are also signed up to this. It's almost like 1999 all over again. because when the internet really did break through, there were a bunch of people who just knew it was going to work, right?
So
and these are the same people.
So go back to the fear, because obviously I'm in the process of launching my own business, and there's the idea, there's the concept, there's the belief, there's the pitch, there's the slides, and then someone says yes, and you're like, whoa, and it has worked. So what was that like, that period of, you knew you had a great idea, but it hadn't worked yet?
Well, it was such a short period of time between us doing it, and I'm not being funny, we launched on the 15th of November last year, and within 2 weeks we were running, a pilot with a major advertiser. And I mean, that was astonishing because it was an alpha, it was unbelievable.
Ink hadn't dried on the idea.
And we couldn't really understand. I mean, we thought, good Lord, we've got this, the zeitgeist is with us, and it has been ever since. And I mean, one of the things that I was talking about today is that, the traction that we have had, I mean, it's a bit overwhelming, if I'm really honest with you, because I didn't realise just how kind of, when I talked, about the adversarial nature of the client-agency relationship, which I had witnessed and found very strange, like back when I went back, to actually be in the room with clients who are, like you're, they're young, really interesting, innovative people who just want to do the right thing, want to do good. They don't want to, don't get me wrong, everyone wants to earn money, okay? But that's kind of a given, We're very privileged in our world. We live in a Western society. We have great jobs. We have interesting opportunities in front of us. Technology is actually something that we embrace as opposed to be frightened of. And that kind of mentality they want to meet like-minded individuals, and it just so happens that being a bit older than your average 35-year-old chief programmatic officer or whatever gets me, because I understand marketing and I understand media, but most of all I understand consumers, and I love people and I want them to have a good experience of brands. I don't want them to feel negative about brands. And I could see what was happening, and it still is, unfortunately, in some instances, with this kind of bombarding people with advertising that just doesn't work. And, I mean, your background, obviously, I mean, how I know you is very much around, your work in social and to me that was just like absolutely the way it had to become. It had to be a conversation. It couldn't just be broadcast, or and that's where the origins of advertising are. And I think it's been very difficult for a lot of the bigger opcos to move to this new model of when you're actually engaging with an empowered consumer. So the empowered consumer is a personal passion of mine. And I believe that consumers have now, because they have the means of production absolutely in the palm of their hand, that the conversation, they can make your personality, your brand, they can create it themselves. They don't need an advertising agency to do that for them. So that has shifted control and power completely away from the old model of, well, if David Ogilvy says in his little red book that that's the way advertising works, then that is the law, in a bit of a kind of Chairman Mao way, right? The reality is that my 16-year-old son will make his own mind up, of course being manipulated probably by Cambridge Analytica somewhere on the line. And that's where the blockchain, in my opinion, really is powerful.
Right, so I would firstly like to congratulate you on completely ignoring all my instructions before we started recording this podcast, and we've spent the start of the podcast talking about your shiny new object, which is in fact blockchain, media and data, and that was brilliant. And to be honest with you, I pretend that I know more about blockchain than I do, so it was really great to get a bit of a kind of first person understanding. So thank you for making me a smarter person. So now what we're going to do, we're going to get to know you.
Okay.
We're going to ask you some getting to know you questions, as is tradition on this podcast. So, all right. So when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, how do you get yourself back on track?
I will breathe.
Okay.
I will concentrate on breathing.
What, in a meditative way,
Yes,
in a yogic
absolutely.
way, or it's
I mean, I may be a bit yogic, but really it's about just resetting, where you are from the point of view of... And it works. I mean, I don't... Very little intimidates me, if anything now. I'm not frightened.
That's the breathing, then, isn't it? Okay. All right. So, in the last 5 years, which new beliefs or behaviours have improved your work life?
I think the freedom to have my own voice and not worry about what other people think of me.
So, tell me more about that. So, that's a very romantic ideal that you can, say what you think. And I think I used this quote last time, and I apologise if I did. But John Lennon, I'm a massive Beatles fan. John Lennon said that if you're honest, you won't have many friends, but you have the right ones.
Correct.
Which I really like. So, and I struggle with being super honest with people. Like I'll have a goal in mind that I want to get to, and I'll just get to it by whatever angle. So how does that work in your head?
Well,
your ruthless honesty and.
Well, no, I don't think you need to have ruthless honesty. I think honesty is about... Honesty can be kind too, I think that's kind of a really interesting dynamic between men and women, because I think men often see honesty in quite an aggressive... They see it as aggressive, whereas I think most... I'm sorry, but, I'm speaking as I find. I think most women appreciate honesty when it's from the heart and its intent is good. And, I have to say that one of the things that has really changed in my lifetime that I'm very happy about is that when I first went into the boardroom, there were very few women. We were like maybe one or two girls in the gang, right? And it was always that we were competitors, not collaborators.
With each other?
Yeah, absolutely. It was who could be more like a bloke. Who could be the most blokey. And thankfully, I think that has really radically changed. And, what I think women bring, and, I hope that, this is something I live every day. I think what women bring to the business process and to the process of the values that we hold dear is that if we release ourselves from this kind of our image is the most important thing and being liked is the most important thing, we just bring our honesty, right, but from a good place. Because I don't want to hurt anybody, right? I'm not interested in that. I don't want to be aggressive. I'm not interested in winning, yeah? What I'm interested in is doing something that's good and building something that will last. And hopefully we'll have a positive legacy.
So on that, if you were going to give advice to a super smart, driven student who is trying to get into media, blockchain, digital marketing, data, what advice would you give them? And would you give different advice to a girl or a boy?
No, I would not give different advice to a girl or a boy. I'd say that straight off the bat. I might give a little bit of an additional advice to a girl.
Which one would that be?
Don't be intimidated by, the bromance. Because it can, we are talking tech here, and I mean, I sit on the board of Women in Tech, London Tech Advocates, and I feel very, very passionately that we need more women in advertising technology and technology in general. And I've been very fortunate to meet some incredible women, so who are leading the charge on that. So that is a good thing. But no, I think that the most important thing right now is to allow them to... And one of the things that I do get a lot of is people saying to me, young people who are coming in either as graduates or who are second jobbers or whatever, and they say, I just want to be honest, and I don't understand how I can do that in these corporations. And so, to my mind, it's like encouraging them to either join startups, do their own thing, have a portfolio career, find like-minded leaders who will allow you to do to be original and to communicate effectively. And that originality, I think, is so important to this millennial, whatever label you want to put on people. It's so important that people have that freedom. And I think you're blessed, frankly, to live in the age that you do, although I completely understand all the problems that are out there from, mortgages and buying homes and all that other stuff. But it is so much more interesting than it was when I first left uni.
So, in terms of your career,
Yeah.
what has been the best investment of your time, your energy, or your money?
Do you mean in terms of the best investment, in terms of what I was, the return on investment, to use a media thing?
Yeah,
or
what's been the best ROI? On, what's the
But
thing,
from
looking back and you've gone,
Yeah.
right, do you know what? I put loads of time into that thing, or I burn loads of energy on that, or actually it was worth me investing that cash. What's been the thing that's really made a difference to you?
Well, truth has made an absolutely enormous difference to me, because I feel absolutely, released by it. I mean, I just feel that, this is what I was put here to do.
Because I feel a similar thing about doing my not yet launched business. That my partner said to me the other day. She said, "You're really acting differently now.
Yeah.
You have a different way about you, a swagger that
Yes.
when I was in a band many years ago. So it's like you were back then. You were just like, you go when you're doing your thing. It's just like that's it. There's no one to report to, and every victory is your victory. Every failure is
yours.
It's yours, but you can instantly learn from it.
Sure, and you can just take that on and move forward. I think that one of the things that I'm always intrigued by is the fact that, this is actually the most enjoyable thing I've ever been involved in, because I just don't feel anything other than being true. I love what I'm doing. I feel it's absolutely resonating. I think the thing that you're creating, right, to go back to your point around, your swagger or whatever, is my authentic self that I'm projecting, rather than something that, I've had to manufacture to, sort of please my bosses or to please my business partners even, And I think that one of the things that's been brilliant about working with Adam Graham is that, he is he's just very, very calm about everything. And if something is shit or what goes wrong or whatever, it's like, well, that wasn't expecting that one. What about you? And you just analyse it, and then you take the learnings and you just apply them to the next thing. And that's a really important part of what, building something is about. You need to be doing it from that sort of, without sounding too completely and utterly pretentious, but there's a certain purity to it, And I'm fortunate to be able to do this at the age I am at. And I mean, I feel extraordinarily motivated and energized by it, which is wonderful, So yes, but I mean, when I look back on my career, I mean, I've had a very, very amazing career. I mean, I'm not, I look back and think, who the hell was that woman, And that's kind of, but you make shit happen, and that's it.
So, what's your day look like? Because I have this realization that I had my first hangover since December. Right.
What, this morning? Because you knew you were meeting me.
Sure. Wasn't this morning. No. But I was, when you're a founder and you're doing your own business, you can't have a hangover.
No,
just can't.
No, you can't. You can't.
Because you're at 80% or 60% or 14% or whatever it is.
That's very
and
good
sure,
point.
you can show up at meetings. Sure, you can get stuff away. But you are robbing yourself. So how do you? What's your day look like? Are you a night owl or early riser?
No,
give me a top line on your.
I'm a really early riser.
How early is it?
Probably about 5-6 o'clock in the morning.
Alarm goes off at.
Yeah.
At 5?
It depends what I'm doing. If I'm going to the gym, then it will go off at 5.
Right.
If I'm not going to the gym, then it will go off at 6.
So straight out of bed.
And I'm very lucky because where I live, my gym is literally across the courtyard and around, and literally like 2 seconds to the left.
You can show up in your pyjamas.
Could do if that was like, so I'm very.
And do you do an hour in the gym?
Yeah, do an hour in the gym. An hour. I don't do it every day, but I do it 3 times a week.
And then back home, or
back home, shower, get changed, put the theatre clothes on, because that's how I look at it. I look at it as that we're going into now the performance. And what I mean by that is that, I have OCD, and not severe, but I have it to the point that I need to have a certain look every day. I've always been like that. It's been something
different every day.
Every single day I have to wear something different. And I've always had this kind of mentality about how I get dressed, what I wear,
Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I am a coordinated woman, right? So my clothes always match my, I think about what I'm going to wear. And it's, if you like, that is my sort of, creative armour, if it makes sense, about who I am and what I think about myself. And I think it's really, really important to have respect. This is my thing, but it's my respect for myself, and it also is the respect that I have for when I engage with with individuals or outside world. So usually I will have an 8:30 meeting, which could be with either one of my colleagues or with one of our collaborators. And then the rest of my day will revolve around meetings with either clients and or events that I will attend and I will speak at, because I do an awful lot of public speaking, because I'm spreading religion,
And what's the goal with that public speaking? Because I'm sort of struggling with that at the minute. I'm like, do I spend loads of time on stage, or do I stay at home and kind of
I think
crank out the work? Like, how do you work out the right balance of them?
Well, I mean, for me, it's all about making sure that we're talking to clients, because it's clients that matter to us. I mean, at the end of the day, the only way that change can happen is when you persuade the people who can write the checks or, spend the money. And I do and have done attended events where I've been sitting next to, people who work in the industry, in the legacy agencies or whatever. And, I find the conversations deeply frustrating because everyone's putting their fingers in their ears and going, la, 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 this isn't happening. And I mean, but that's the kind of waste of my time. I mean, it gets me column inches, right? Yeah. But it's not really valuable to me.
But I think that finger in the ear, la-la-ness is the beacon that tells you you're going in the right direction.
Oh, yeah.
Because you will have been to social media events over the year where it's like 3 people on the panel who all agree with each other. So, what do you do with user-generated content? And everyone goes, well, what that person said. Whereas if you're on a panel and you're talking about, whatever, and people are disagreeing with you or feeling uncomfortable, that's it. I
mean, it's.
So I'm on panels at the minute talking about computational creativity to agencies, and they're just going, well,
they won't understand any of that.
We've got a room of writers and a room of well, that's not
that's
necessarily
very tough. That is a really tough. That's tough, but I think the other thing is that they're really. I mean, at the moment, they're still really challenged with the whole programmatic creative, right? And I mean, you're on the next level of that. And personally, I think we should forget the programmatic creative and just go straight to what you're doing, because it is very hard for, going back to my point about people who've been in these jobs for many, many years, and they feel very, and this is their identity. Okay, so what you're doing is you're kind of like. You're actually fucking with their identity, although that's not your intent. It's not my intent, okay? But the reality is what we're saying, it's not... It's like, no, I don't want to hear this because I don't want that to be I don't want the reality. I don't want that reality. And the challenge of change, is a real problem. It's a real world problem. So consequently, when you're... And this is one of the things that I think... I didn't mention when you asked me about what do I do in my typical day, but I will, and I increasingly am at the moment, talking more and more to investors because they want to know what the future looks like, right? Nobody wants to miss the next internet boat, because they did. A lot of them missed it the first time round. Okay, so one of the most interesting things about the whole world of data, media, and blockchain is that there's a problem. Everyone knows there's a problem. It's a problem that has to be fixed. Therefore, how do you fix it? So of course there's a lot of spread betting going down, and the other thing is that with the dominance of Google and Facebook and increasingly Amazon and the Internet of Things emerging, we are now going to see an oil boom of data, okay? And that data has to be managed ethically. And this is our opportunity to do that.
So, getting towards the end of the podcast now, and this is ironic I'm asking you this question that I try to ask everyone that comes on the podcast. If you had a digital media budget of 10 million quid to get any message out there, what would it be?
Tell the truth. Do good. I mean, the media. I think consumers want. I think real people, the people who buy shit, have always wanted authenticity, and you only get authenticity by being true and being real. And I think that, despite everybody's best intentions in the tech world, the consumer has voted, and they've voted by turning off the ads. And, we have to reset the industry. And I believe passionately that the consumer has to be at the very heart of everything we do. And if they're not, then we are going to lose.
So, I'm going to push you on that one. If you put the consumer at the heart of everything you do, you wouldn't advertise to them.
Well,
no one gets up in the morning going, do you know what I really want? It's to see a load of ads.
Well, I have to be honest with you. At one time, people used to look forward to the advertising on television. People used to tune in to the, It was event TV.
That is romantic.
It's not. It's not. It was the case. People still, but in the millions, view the John Lewis Christmas ad.
Yeah, but that's
because it's event. It's event.
That is part of the cultural consciousness,
yes.
as is the Super Bowl. But if I look back,
that's the difference. That's you've hit the nail on the head, because it's gone from being about culture and society to being about burning the revenue. That's the problem. Advertising has not moved on with the consumer hand in hand. You come from social media, right? And social media is the new advertising. It is the new way of communicating. Conversation. It's the way that we communicate. And what has happened is that the mobile phone has basically become an extension of the human body. It has become the thing that you identify with in your terms of your personality and how you as a human being present yourself to the outside world. And I think that advertising creatives and media people have to embrace that change.
Right, I'm wrapping it up there. So just to recap, you had an incredible career of 31 years in media, starting in publishing, national newspapers. You bought a company, sold it to WPP, trebled your revenue at Neo, at Ogilvy, and then you started to become quite... there's some really brilliant quotes, like, if you reward the wrong behaviour, you get the wrong behaviour. And this I love, you said it, I'm still 18, I'm learning all the time. And then in a very serious tone, you said, never underestimate me, which... I wasn't going to do that before. I'm definitely not going to do it now. Your 7-year-old son was mining Bitcoin when he was 7 years ago when he was 11. And it was really great to get a bit of a schooling on media fraud and so on. He talked about the truth a lot. And what you want to do is something he came back to a lot was improving relationships between advertisers and consumers. And it's brilliant that the business has got this overwhelming traction. But then there's a kind of higher purpose that I think you come back to a lot. It's like bringing honesty, like from a really good place. You want to build something good. You love being true, projecting your authentic self. I love the idea that you get dressed for the theatre of business, and like myself, being a sort of advertising rebel person, the innovation does challenge people's identity. In order for them to accept the innovation as the truth, they need to give up their previous understanding, which is giving up their identity, which is why so little innovation is sold in my opinion. But I think the thing that struck me most of all is you said that you only get authenticity by being true and real, which is a lovely way to end it. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Probably the best way is to link in with me at mkd@truth.agency, or you can follow me on Twitter at Mary Keane, Keane, Dawson, Dawson.
Mary, thank you so much.
Pleasure, Tom. Pleasure.